Today we're wearing a hat. Welcome back to Channel 7. This week I'm going to be talking to you guys about the books that I read in February. I'm going to be honest, I was in a bit of a reading slump, which sucks because I wanted to read so many different books, nonfiction, fiction, whatever, by Black authors as it is Black History Month. I also wanted to throw in some romance reads because Valentine's Day again was this month. But you know what? School really just got me and I just didn't get the chance. Or not that I didn't get the chance, but I just wasn't feeling like reading because I was reading so much for class and I was feeling a bit overwhelmed and books were not the comfort that I was looking for. I definitely turned to K-dramas in this month and I'm not mad about it. I had a fantastic time. For now, let's talk about the 5 books that I read this month. The first book that I read, I don't know how I feel about. It was an Agatha Christie book. I think ever since I read what was the last good Agatha Christie I read? I think it was ABC Murders. Ever since then, I just haven't read a book that I've been obsessed with by Agatha Christie. I think I read all her good ones first, and then all the mediocre ones seem to be what I've been picking up. But I think this is going to be my last Agatha Christie book. And the reason for that is over the month of February, I saw a video on TikTok about Agatha Christie, and I was quite unaware of this fact. I don't know if I should say this should influence other people's decision to read her or not. I think it really is up to the individual, what influences your choices to support certain artists, authors, etc. And I think this bothers me more because one of my favorite Agatha Christie books is, I don't even know. So it's called And Then There Were None, but if you search up the original 2 titles of the novel, they were not the greatest. In fact, they were blatantly racist towards Native Americans and Black individuals, using very derogatory language. And if you've ever read the book, you'll know that all the characters basically die. So, you know, I just had questions. That was one of my favorite books. And Then There Were None is definitely one of my favorite Agatha Christie's. I've raved about it, and now I'm kind of just like, wow. Not to talk about that too much, I just don't think I'm ever going to read Agatha Christie because that's kind of traumatized me a little bit. Anywho, let's talk about the book that I did read by her before I found this out, and that is Murder is Easy. In the story, there was not our, central detectives that she normally writes from the perspective of, which is Miss Marple or Detective Hercule Poirot. Instead, we have some man named Luke Fitzgerald who is on the train and meets a old lady, she's an old lady, who's basically like, there's murders going on in my town and I know who the murderer is. And she was on her way to go and report it, and this guy thought this woman was just crazy. She actually gets killed. It's not a spoiler, it happens right at the beginning of the book, and he's like, okay, she knew who the murderer was, so there's something very off about the situation, and he goes undercover in this town to kind of investigate and find out who's killing not just this woman, but a lot of other people in the town. For me, this was a solid 3-star read. I'd recommend it. Well, maybe not anymore because the whole situation, but nonetheless, I gave it 3 stars, and that is my Agatha Christie obsession being put to rest. Farewell. It was nice reading you while I did, but no more. The next book that I read was actually for class. It is The Joys of Motherhood by Buchi Emichita. This story was really, really unfortunate and depressing. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna tell you right off the bat, I give it a 3.5-star rating. Not because it wasn't well written, not because the story wasn't excellently done, but because I was truly miserable reading about this character's misfortune. And for some reason, that just made the experience not that enjoyable. This follows a woman named Unu Ego. The story actually starts with her attempted suicide. It follows her life as she tries to become this perfect traditional ideal of the Igbo woman, based off of, traditional mores and like what society says her role is as a mom and as a woman. I thought this was very interesting because I think on a surface level people could say this is a very feminist novel. I read a lot of scholarship saying that because I did my presentation on this story, And I have to say I disagree that this is a strongly feminist story, just because trying to ascribe that title kind of takes away from what I think the story is actually trying to say. I don't think that the author is rejecting traditional ideals of motherhood or womanhood. I think she's drawing our attention to the difficulties of exporting traditional ideals into the urban context during a time where Lagos, which is where this book takes place for a lot of the story, is being colonized, and it is heavily being influenced by this new industrial and capitalist kind of system of work, and family is kind of not at the forefront of the culture and society, right? And like that's a huge part of why the main character's attempt to export traditional ideals of motherhood and womanhood into the society fails altogether. I enjoyed dissecting this piece of literature and talking about it in a presentation format. I think it's a great book to do that with. Now, in terms of this being a great and fun time, no, it was not that exciting because things were just going wrong left, right, and center. And our main character was really just struggling, literally fighting for her life from page to page. But there is some very beautiful quotes in this that I just wanted to highlight. I don't know, this really moved me. I thought this was kind of the peak of character development, although I don't want to spoil too much, but I thought this was a really important passage in the story. So I'm going to read it. No context need be. I think the words speak for themselves. What have I gained from all this? Yes, I have many children, but what do I have to feed them on? On my life. I have to work myself to the bone to look after them. I have to give them my all. And if I am lucky enough to die in peace, I even have to give them my soul. They will worship my dead spirit to provide for them. It will be hailed as a good spirit so long as there are plenty of yams and children in the family. But if anything should go wrong, if a young wife does not conceive or there is famine, my dead spirit will be blamed. When will I be free? But even in her confusion, she knew the answer. Never, not even in death. I am a prisoner of my own flesh and blood. Is it such an enviable position? The men make it look as if we must aspire for children or die. That's why when I lost my first son, I wanted to die, because I failed to live up to the standard expected of me by the males in my life, my father and my husband, and now I have to include my sons? But who made the law that we should hope not in our daughters? We women subscribe to that law more than anyone. Until we change all this, it is still a man's world, which women will always help to build. And that's from page 186, 187 of this edition. Brilliant, brilliant. Oh my gosh. Moving on. So the next book I read was called Somebody Loves You by Mona Arshi. This book, I honestly have to say, this was again, went in and came out. I don't know what happened. So I know there's a main character, her name's Ruby, and when she was young, she decided that she was no longer going to use her voice. She felt that there was already enough people exchanging words and sounds, and she didn't need to add to the noise that was already part of life and the world. She also used this as a coping mechanism and as a refuge, as her mother struggled with mental illness and was, though sometimes present, very much absent. And that's all I can really tell you about the story. I thought it was beautifully written. I have to say, like, the author knows how to use words in a very captivating manner. I just don't think I connected with the story. I ultimately thought it was good, but I can't really speak too much to it. I gave it 3 stars, and yeah. Next book that I read was Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. Everyone knows this story. I'm so sorry for the noise. You're probably hearing my garage open, my dad shovel, like it's making noise. Anyways, so Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. This is my 2nd or 3rd time reading this story. I had to read it for class again. I wrote an essay on it, so I can talk at length about this, and also Buchiya Michita's The Joys of Motherhood. What I absolutely adore about those 2 stories together is that I think Buchiya Michita's story is actually a response to Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. If you've read this book, you might assume that Okonkwo actually represents what maleness and masculinity looks like in Igbo tradition, but he actually doesn't. He is over masculine, like he's overly emasculate, if that makes sense, and his character is hyper aggressive, and that actually has a lot to do with his childhood and his father's countenance when he was younger. So this is about a man named Okonkwo, and his father was a complacent, very idle man. He loved music and he loved the arts. He was fantastic with language, which is actually a very important thing in Igbo tradition, the use of language in parables to speak. But Okonkwo essentially grew up to resent his father for his idleness, which led to their family's poverty. And he decided that he was going to hate at the depths of his heart everything that his father loved. He's basically driven by this fear of being a failure like his father, and because of that, he doesn't show emotion aside from anger. He is very aggressive. He's a man known to be active. He doesn't really speak or use words to convey things. He uses his fist. He uses his body. And I think this is a very interesting analysis can be done. Ultimately, I did my paper on Okonkwo and his downfall. How did it happen? What role did fear play in that? This story is honestly so complex, and I think a lot of the times we read this from a very like Western view and misinterpret or misunderstand what Achebe was doing. And apparently in an interview, he actually talked about how a lot of people aren't looking at the separate layers of the story. They're drawing one conclusion, that this is critical of Igbo culture or this is critical of Christianity, which is, you know, very one-dimensional. There's so many layers, so many things to consider when reading this, and like I'm gonna read this again and again and again and try and pick apart all the layers and all the intricacies of Achebe's writing. But ultimately, I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars again, and yeah. The last book I read, I finished last night, and I am head over heels in love. I actually just made a TikTok about this, so if you want a shorter review, you can check out my TikTok. But I read This Woman Kingdom by Tahara Mafi, and this story was exceptional. It set up the series so well. So this is the first book. I cannot even wait for the second, third, fourth, hopefully 5th book in this series. This brought us into a completely new world with different languages, different regions, different politics, characters who are so intricate and complex, characters we haven't even gotten the chance to unpack and fully understand. We are a witness to an entirely different world in the story, and I felt transported. To give a quick synopsis, we have a servant girl who's actually the secret heiress to an ancient kingdom, and we have a crown prince who is the crown prince to the current nation that we are in, and we have a king who is, well, he is who he is. And then lots of just different characters, an orphan boy, a minister, lots of different characters, different dynamics. The magic system in this book is very interesting because magic can be mined, and I am just very intrigued by this concept. I can't wait to learn more about that. I am anticipating a love triangle. I'm anticipating an enemies to lovers, which is saying something because there's an initial love interest we're introduced to, and I like him. I do. But I feel like something could happen elsewhere. If you get to the end of the book and you are thinking the same thing, please let me know, because I don't want to be the only person who's anticipating this very potentially exciting relationship with this maybe dark character. I gave this book 4 stars and I really enjoyed it, so like I said, I'm looking forward to the next books in this series. Okay, those are all the books that I read this month. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know what books you're reading, and also follow me on Goodreads if you have one, and we can check out what each other's reading. And I usually make little reviews on all the books. So yeah. All right, guys, I'm signing off, but it was great chatting with you, and I'll see you next time.